But we're in the book of Acts, and this book, as most of us know, is written by Luke, one of the disciples. And it chronicles the actions of the Holy Spirit as the church begins to grow. And on our Wednesday nights, if you can't be, you're missing something if you're missing our Wednesday nights. On Wednesday nights, we have begun our study on the book of Acts. And we've begun this study for the very same reason. We are looking at specifically the role of the Holy Spirit in our church's life. And how important it is. And how important it was back then. And today we're going to examine some of the patterns and principles of the early church leaders that catapulted the early church from a group of ragtag outcasts and weirdos to a church that began to grow exponentially. So, if you turn with me, turn to chapter 16. And I'm only going to read a couple verses here. But there's a lot in these couple verses. Acts chapter 16, verse 6. Acts 16, verse 6. Paul and his companions traveled throughout the region of, and please forgive me for my butchering of these names, Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter I had these words memorized. Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. So they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia, standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. The first principle I see here, and that I see Paul and Silas doing, is to get started even when you don't see the whole plan clearly. Get started even when you don't see the whole plan clearly. Have you ever felt like you just weren't sure where God was leading you? That you came to a point in your life and you just, what am I doing, God? Where are you? You had no idea where you were. You had no idea what you were supposed to do next. You had no idea. You just knew you weren't in the right spot at that point in time. Now, we might not have been trotting around the Mediterranean like Paul and Silas are here, but I think we can all agree there are definitely times of uncertainty in our lives when direction just doesn't seem clear. Don't you wish during that time that God was like a GPS? Where you could type in, where you wanted, where you think he was heading you, guiding you. Ooh, there's a big ring. I'm going to take this off. And I'm sure you all can hear me because half the time I don't wear this anyway. I don't turn it on anyway. So let me just look. But, where you could, getting back to God being a GPS, where you could type in the direction, type in where you think God's leading you, and then he would be able to direct you exactly where you want to go. Don't you think Moses would have really liked this? That as Moses was leading the Israelites out of Israel, that he could have just had God be his GPS and direct them. God kind of was, but then they got lost for 40 years. I was going to have up on the screen, direct your attention to the screen for a meme or whatever, a meme of a picture of Moses walking in the desert with the people of Israel behind him, and the caption read, "Moses lost in the desert for 40 years, and there's people, they had, quote, people speak, recalculating, because that's what it feels like sometimes. But what's really important for us to draw out of this text, what's really important for us to see about Paul and Silas is that they started to go before they had clear direction. They were on a mission. They were driven by their mission. What was this mission? What was the mission of Paul? That Jesus is the good news. That the people were lost without it. And we had to go share the gospel with everyone. They knew. They couldn't just stay seated where they were. They had to go. They didn't know where they were going, but they tried their hardest. They just started going. And they knew that the Holy Spirit was leading them to spread the gospel. We often do a whole lot of nothing for God because we are waiting for blinking neon signs to tell us exactly where we're going. I've heard it. I'm one of those people that are very cautious. I'm a very conservative person. So before I do anything, I'd like to know where I'm going, how I'm getting there, what it's going to cost me. And something that's been interesting in my journey here is God said, no, I'm giving you this step, and you just have to take that step. I won't tell you the next step until you get to the next step. And as many of you know, my journey to this church was interesting because when I started, when I really felt God starting to lead me to becoming a lead pastor, I would have never picked here. Not because I don't love you people, but because this church wasn't even on my radar. At that time, it was before Pastor Tim announced his retirement. I mean, his leaving. When I started, I thought God was leading me and Vicki in a totally different direction. We were in the middle. Matter of fact, when we interviewed here, we were actually in the middle of preparing to become church planners in Harrisburg. Not many people know that. Nobody, not much people. But we were in the beginning stages of that. We were almost confident God was leading us to a mission field of planting churches. All we were doing was taking steps of faith throughout that whole process. And then God opens up this awesome church. And I would never have thought I would have been here. But I was going before I had clear plan laid out before us. Maybe what we need to understand today is that we are on the same mission as Paul and Silas. And what we really need to do today as a church is to tell God, we will stop waiting for clear direction and we will simply go. That we will allow the Holy Spirit to move us. That when we see as a congregation how we can affect our communities, that instead of waiting to see exactly how to do that we just start doing it. The more we listen to the Holy Spirit and follow His direction in our lives, the more we will see our God-given opportunity to share our faith with others. Remember, our sermon series that we're currently in is called Divine Appointments. The more we listen to the Holy Spirit, the more divine appointments God is going to set for us personally and for our church. The second principle that I see here in these little verses is to keep going even if you don't see the results that you expected. Keep going even if you don't see the results you expected. Now, Paul and Silas expected when they left that when they went to go to Mysia, that they were going to have an awesome ministry there. They were trying to get to Asia because Asia needed people. They needed to know Christ. And yet, the Spirit blocked it. Have you ever done a corn maze? You know what I'm talking about, the corn maze, right? Have you ever done one? Have you ever, I love them. I don't get to do them as often as I like. But I love corn mazes. Corn mazes, if you don't know what a corn maze is, it's kind of like a hedge maze. It's just out in the cornfield. And they can get big, elaborate corn mazes, or you can get simple ones. But I like the elaborate ones, the ones that take a whole lot of thinking. And you get lost very easily in these corn mazes. One of the things I learned from a corn maze is that there are times when you have a choice between 2, 3, 4 different ways to go. And you can be confident in going, I'm going to go pick this path right here. And you can be confident in that path. You're sure this is going to lead you out of the corn maze. And you're confident, and it's looking just like it's leading you out of the corn maze. And then you take the next turn, and one of two things happen. You either come up to corn, a dead end, or you're back to where you started from. It's at these times, it reminds us that we won't always be successful with every avenue that we try. At those times when you're in a corn maze, what you have to do is, okay, that path isn't a good one. Let me go to this path. And you slowly figure the path out. And I think Luke paints this picture for us to encourage us to not give up when we feel like we've gone in the wrong direction. Think how Paul and Silas must have felt. They start walking. Now, this is where God's leading. And then God says, nope. Okay, we'll go this way. And then they go this way. And they think this is where God's leading. And nope. Where's he going? The dead ends they were coming to. And, and it's easy in those times to feel like a failure. But I like what Albert Einstein used to say. Albert Einstein at one time was asked how many times he failed in a certain invention, in creating his, in coming up with his inventions. And Einstein looked at the person and said, I've never failed. I've only found 1,000 ways not to do something, how not to do something. And that was how he thought. And many times many times we simply don't see in the immediate what God might be working on behind the scenes. What can seem like the wrong road or a dead end or there's no way this could work if I go that way, might actually be accomplishing more than we realize. Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, said it like this. If you will turn with me to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 says it like this. In verse 4. For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? What, after all, is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I, Paul, he's saying Paul, planted the seed. Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes all things grow. I had almost this exact same thing happen to me when I was at Pine Grove Wesleyan. At one time, we felt led to start Celebrate Recovery at Pine Grove Wesleyan. And I thought for sure that this was the Pine Grove area desperately needs Celebrate Recovery. And it's a really hard fit with drugs and alcohol. So we thought for sure when we started this ministry that it would really take off. Well, we had it for quite a few years, and we struggled. From my knowledge, we had maybe 1 or 2 or 3 really success stories of Pine Grove Wesleyan. But what I didn't know at the time was God was preparing. We were watering the seeds. We were planting the seeds, actually. Because what was happening, what we became, was we would have people come from different areas that would learn under me, learn under us, get a feel of it, and then they were taking that knowledge and going elsewhere. And we often gave a whole bunch of support to these other areas. Now, several years later, like 6 or 7 years later, we finally were in conversation with another group. We were both 2 small groups. This is all God divine. What happened was we ended up merging. They had like 6 women and we had like 4 guys. We merged. That group is now up to, I think the last I heard, 40 or 50 people. They are reaching out to a group home, a halfway house that comes to help meet them. It is growing beyond my wildest dream. For me, for the area that we were in, it's growing because we follow God. But I didn't know that then. There was often times when I'd be sitting there at Pine Grove Wesleyan, being the only person coming to Celebrate Recovery, asking, "What are you doing here? Do you want me to close it?" Every time God says, "No, not yet." And I'd be like, "But who are we helping?" And he'd just keep coming back saying, "It's not about you." Until one day he said, "Okay, now close." All right? But we planted the seed. And now there's there's also a Celebrate Recovery that meets in Pine Grove that's doing tremendous, even more than God is in control. I have to step out of it. But I had to keep going, even if I didn't see the results, or the results weren't what we were expecting. And so Paul and Silas are here, and it says in verse 6, the Holy Spirit prevented them. The Holy Spirit prevented them. They listened to the Holy Spirit. There's something here, and it's key to this series. It's key to our journey. And you've been hearing me say this the past couple of weeks. And you've been hearing me say this in prayer meeting the past couple of weeks. When you become a follower of Christ, you are downloading the Holy Spirit into your life. You are allowing the Holy Spirit. You are no longer driven simply by what you want to do or where you want to go or by your own selfish desires. As a follower of Christ, your life is surrendered completely to God, or it should be. And it's to His perfect will and plan for your life. See, God has a plan for each one of our lives. He has the perfect plan for our lives if we allow Him. Now, to some, surrendering to God sounds like something terrible form of control. That I'm no longer... in America, in our individualistic society, no one can control me. I can do what I want. I am free. This is our mentality. And yet, I have found surrender is key to a happy life. I tried for many years to be in control, and my life was miserable. But when I surrendered to God, it was free. Why? Because God guides me, and He steers us, and He loves us to be everything He created us to be. When I'm in that perfect relationship with God and He's directing my... I can't explain how much better my life is today than it was 15 years ago. We talked about this a little bit in Sunday school. About 16 years ago, I was at the point of trying to commit suicide. That life wasn't worth it anymore. That I couldn't handle it anymore. I got tired of struggling with my finances. I got tired of struggling with life. I got tired of struggling with my spouse. I got tired of everything because Jonathan was in control. And let me tell you, when Jonathan's in control, he makes a whole lot of stupid mistakes and stupid choices. But with God in control, He's directing my path, and my life is so much better. I could never even imagine. And I'm not talking about really finding it. I'm talking about life. Just how I approach life is so much better today than it was back then. I'm able to handle issues and problems and so much better than it. And it's all because of God. I'm not doing it. I'm allowing God to lead me. And yet there's still times where I try to take back that steering wheel. Say, I want control. I want to do this. And every time I usually end up in the gutter or something, or run into a tree. When we really get intentional about making the most of God's divine appointments, when we get intentional about meeting people where they are, when we get intentional about being on God's mission, we will have the determination and resolve to keep going and not give up. We will have the resolve to keep going even if we don't see where God is leading. The third principle that I see here is if we take time to listen, and be willing to do whatever God asks, we will be directed to life-changing appointments. I'll say that one more time. If we take the time to listen and be willing to do whatever God asks, we will be directed to life-changing appointments. I mean, I come back to Paul and Silas here in Acts. Read again. Read later this week again at how Paul and Silas move and respond to the leading of the Holy Spirit. It kind of makes me think of that voice-activated technology we have now. You can get this voice-activated technology in your car where you just speak and it does. Vicky really likes the voice-activated technology in our house. We have this little box, and we have Alexa on our little box. For those that don't know who Alexa is, Alexa is Amazon's best friend. And basically, you can tell Alexa this. You ask her for the weather, and she tells you the weather. You can hook up your house to, if you have the right lights and everything, you can hook up your house where you can just speak, Alexa, turn on my lights, and Alexa turns on your lights. If you have the right refrigerator and the right stove, you could tell Alexa to turn on your stove at 350, and she would turn on your stove. It recognizes your voice, and it completes whatever task. Paul and Silas was kind of like Alexa, or being like Alexa. They were listening intently to the Holy Spirit. They were waiting for the Holy Spirit to speak to them. And when God spoke, they heard His voice, and they were activated. They immediately started going. Hearing God's voice isn't just something for the super Christians, though. It isn't just because Paul and Silas were these amazing Christians. Hearing each one of us hears God's voice if we want it. God has wired each one of us to be in relationship with Him and to be in communion with Him. He so desires to be in communion with us that He sent His only Son to die on a cross for us. That's how bad He was to be in relationship with humanity. And now listening to the Spirit sometimes comes with that inner voice. You know, when you get that inner voice and you go, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that. Or you better go here. Sometimes it's that inner voice. But as you see in the Scripture, sometimes it's not the inner voice, but the voice of others. When I read verse 9, let me go back to go back to Acts chapter 16, verse 9. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." The man was pleading with Paul to come to Macedonia. I can't help but think of the many ways people around us are calling for help. And we miss it. They might not word it in the most obvious terms, but there are subtle ways that people show they are searching for answers. They're looking for us. We shouldn't be surprised when the world acts like the world. When the world is sinning, we shouldn't be surprised. When they're doing stupid stuff, we shouldn't be surprised. What if we could see? What if instead of judging people, the world the wrong way, what if we could see that people often do what they do, simply because they're trying to find the answers? They don't know what they're doing, and they're just trying to find the right answers. They are hoping that someone will come along who can point them the way and give them hope. They are like the eunuch that Timothy came upon. And when Timothy asked him, "Do you know what you're reading?" he goes, "How can I unless someone tells me?" Many of the times the people out there are acting the way they are because they don't know any better. They don't understand the hope that we have. Now, I mentioned this prayer before, and I'm mentioning it here today. One of the ways that we can start getting in tune with hearing people that might be asking questions, maybe not in the right way, is to simply ask this prayer. Put somebody in my path today, Lord, that I can share the hope in you. And as I said before, I always say this with a warning. Only say that prayer if you mean it. Because if you mean it, and you say that prayer, watch out. God will start opening your eyes to people needing Him. The two questions we all need to answer today. Am I listening? And will I go? Are you listening? There's an important question. Because in order to have communication, we have to listen. We need to shut up on occasion. If your days are crammed with activity, and there's no margin for God to enter in, God can't speak to you. Maybe you need to carve out some quiet time. Maybe you just simply need to start each day by telling God that you are listening and give Him a few minutes to open your eyes. During this time, you can ask God several questions. Who are the people that I interact with every day? How can I slow down, listen, and show that I care? What intentional relationships can I build with people far from God? How can I see more opportunities and less coincidence? And who am I praying for that needs to hear God's good news? Here's an important question for you. Who are you specifically praying for that is lost? Are you praying for anybody? You should be. There should be at least one person you're praying for on a daily basis that doesn't know God, that you're praying that they come into a relationship with God. That's my challenge to you. At least one. I have a lot. But maybe you can start keeping a journal and writing down the names of the people that you're praying for. And then wait to be able to record when they become saved. The only reason why I'm here is because my parents never stopped praying. I had people praying for me. God led me here. Prayers work. I could go for a long time on the amount of, just in my family's life, of who people were praying for and they came to know God. Prayer is important. And then the second part, will you go? This is really the matter of heart for our church, for us individually. It's easy to say it here. It's easy to say all the right things here. But if we don't go, Jesus told his disciples, and he tells us, go and make disciples. He didn't say come to church. He said go. You and God need to work on the things that might be holding you back. We as a church need to be working on things that might be holding us back. I don't know what they are right now. We need to be praying for God to show us. Maybe it's our pride, our selfishness, our insecurity. Maybe we don't think we're good enough or have enough. The place that you are dreading to go the most might be the very place that God asks you to go first. Your next door neighbor might be where God is asking you to go. I'm not talking that we have to go far away. But if you're dreading to go in across the street, maybe to experience all the joy God has for us. And to be all that He's created us to be. We need to fully surrender everything, all of our lives, and be available to God whenever He wants us. Holding back only holds us back. Holding on only quenches the Spirit. To see God move in our church and our community, each one of us has to answer these two questions. Are we listening? And will we go? It has to start with us. Individually. We are to go where He leads and spread the good news to the lost. That is our mission. Our mission as a church is to go and make disciples. It takes each one of us. We are all in this together. So are you listening? And are you willing? Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I praise your holy name. God, if we're not willing and we're not listening and we're not ready, I pray that you make us willing and ready. Help us in our unbelief. Help us help us, each one of us, to listen more closely to you. To not be afraid to step out into the unknown. To become warriors in our communities for you, Lord. Be with each one of us today. In your precious name. Amen. You are dismissed.